How many of you guys have driven those old-timey cars at Holiday World? Look, see, look. All right, so last week I started off with an amusement park reference, but I'm doing it again today. So apparently it's almost summer. I'm ready to go to the amusement park. But those old-timey cars at Holiday World, y'all know what I'm talking about. There's one on the screen of maybe. It's hot. You'll get up there. Y'all know what I'm talking about. It's like the second that you walk in, it's like right there on the left. It's like the old-timey cars you push the pedal. The kids love it. You can't get into the park without the kids wanting to ride this, right? And there's always like this forever huge line to get into this car. Yeah, look, they're like, oh, I love those. Yeah, and they smell like, this crazy gas. I'm sure it's probably not healthy, but whatever. But, they love it. But basically, it's an old car. You get in and you drive it around the track. Like I said, the kids love it. But you get in there and you drive it. But the word drive is kind of a misnomer there. You really don't drive this car. See, there's this little bumper right in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
They won't let you go anywhere. You can't go left off the bumper. You can't go right off the bumper. You're staying exactly where you want to go. It doesn't matter how hard you go down that hill and turn to the left real quick trying to get over it. It won't let you over the thing. It's all good. It gives you this false sense, this false illusion that you're in charge of this car. But it's not true. You're not in charge at all. You might want to go right, and go up over the hill, go off-road. But as soon as you try, it's going to kick you left and you're going to go under the bridge like you're supposed to. You have no control over where that car is going. That car is going where it's supposed to go, where it's meant to go, where it's designed to go. And this life is the same way. With God, it's the same way. See, sometimes in this life, we think that we're in control. We think that we're calling the shots. We think that we're making decisions. We think that we're picking out the destination and picking out the right route to get there. But that's not the case at all. God is making the plans. God's making the destination. God's calling the shots. There's an old adage that says, if you want to make God laugh, just make plans. And that could not be more true. That could not be more right, because God is in control, not us. Last week we looked at the first half of chapter 3 of the story. And we looked at the beginning of the life of Joseph. Now, Joseph had that crazy roller coaster life, up and down, up and down. He was the favorite son of a very wealthy man named Jacob. Jacob was also known as Israel. That's where the nation of Israel comes from, the name. He was his favorite son. He was lavished with gifts. Everybody knew that he was the favorite, even though he was born 11 out of 12. His brothers didn't like him. They were jealous of him. And in cool, calculated malice, they sold him into slavery. And he went all the way from the land of Canaan all the way down to Egypt to be a slave. And he heads down there. Once he gets to Egypt, he is purchased by a man named Potiphar, who was in the Pharaoh's court. He was a high up in Egypt. And while he's there, he ascends the ranks and becomes head of Potiphar's household. But then he's thrown in prison for a false accusation by Potiphar's wife. But then while he's in prison, he becomes the leader in the prison. He gets promoted to where the warden promotes him up. And then finally he meets these two guys who are prisoners, and he interprets their dreams, but they forget him, and he stays in prison for another 2 years. Just roller coaster, up and down and up and down. But the roller coaster for Joseph is about to crescendo here in our story. And everything that Joseph has been through, everything that he has been through his entire life is about to culminate into this one moment and bring him to this one moment. He's about to get a great promotion. One night while Joseph is still in prison, the Pharaoh has a dream. Pharaoh was the king of Egypt. More than likely this time it was a man by the name of Sorosis III or Sinstra III. It's a crazy name, but anyway, Pharaoh has a pair of dreams. He's got a pair of dreams, and he knows that they're important. He knows that they mean something. So he calls all of his wise men. He calls all of the great thinkers of the day, everyone, and brings them together, and he tells them the dream, and nobody knows what's going on. They have no clue what's going on with his dream. And then the cupbearer says, oh, wait a minute. 2 years ago, I had a dream, and I told it to this man named Joseph, who's down in prison, and he told me exactly what was going to happen, and it came true. So the cupbearer goes to Pharaoh, and he tells him about Joseph. So Pharaoh knows he needs to know what's going on with these dreams. So he brings Joseph up out of prison. They get him cleaned up. He comes before Pharaoh, and this is what happens in Genesis 41, or in your storybook, page 33. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream and no one can interpret it. But I've heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I cannot do it, Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer that he desires. So right out of the gate, Joseph's like, look, it's not me that's going to interpret this dream. It's not me that can tell you what's going on. I'm not this great psychic or this great mind with this great insight. It's not me. It's God that will give us this answer. So Pharaoh tells Joseph about his dream. He tells him that in the dream he was standing in the Nile River and these 7 big, plump, and good-looking cows come up out of the water. And they're just good-looking cows, And then all of a sudden 7 more cows come out and they're ugly and they're skinny and not good for meat or anything. And then the 7 ugly cows eat the 7 good cows. That's a weird dream, right? You woke up from that and you're like, what is going on? So then he comes into another dream and there's 7 pieces of grain on a stalk. 7 good-looking pieces of grain. And then all of a sudden 7 bad-looking pieces of grain come up and they choke out the healthy ones. 2 dreams that Pharaoh has, and he knows they're significant. He just doesn't know how or why. So he describes these dreams to a man, a Hebrew man, to a prisoner, to a slave, and he waits for Joseph to answer. And this is what Joseph says. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. And this is the one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterwards are 7 years. And so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. These are 7 years of famine. So Joseph tells Pharaoh what the dreams mean. These 7 good years, 7 years of plenty, 7 years where they will be able to get all of the crops that they could possibly handle. And then after that, 7 years of absolutely nothingness. And this is very valuable information for Pharaoh to have here. This is information that will save thousands, if not millions, of people. You see, Egypt at this time was like the epicenter of civilization. They were the big dog at the time. Throughout the known world, Egypt was the place. They were the New York City, the LA, the London. They were the biggest the biggest place in the entire world. They were the big dog. They had the strongest economy. They were the hub for culture and religion. They were the heart of all civilization. They were living during a time of great peace and great calm. So it was critical to Pharaoh that he knows that this is coming, because then they can prepare. Because 7 years of famine could ruin everything for him and ruin everything for Egypt. Joseph tells him there's going to be 7 great years and 7 horrible years. Joseph also gives Pharaoh a bit of advice here, which sometimes when we read through it, we really don't really think about what Joseph is saying here. Here's Joseph, a Hebrew, a slave, a prisoner, coming to Pharaoh and giving him advice. That's pretty bold of Joseph to do, to come up and give Pharaoh advice. He says, set someone up above all of this and take 1/5 of the produce and store it up for the famine years. Joseph gives him the forecast and then gives him this plan to save Egypt. It's so brave of Joseph to say this to Pharaoh, but it pays off. Genesis 41, 39 through 41 says, Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all of this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all of my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. How crazy is that? So here is Joseph, a man who just a few hours ago was in prison as a slave, not anywhere near his home. He's been away from home for 20 plus years. And Pharaoh says, you're second in command of the greatest nation on earth. How crazy is that? It's a crazy turn of events. That would be like the President of the United States going into the federal prison system, finding the worst of the worst prisoner, pulling them out and promoting them to vice president. It would be crazy. It would be groundbreaking and historically newsworthy stuff. And this is exactly what happens to Joseph. And this is the perfect plan that God has been working on throughout all of Joseph's life, and the plan that God's been working on for the line from Abraham to Jesus. And you might say, how does this have anything to do with the line from Abraham to Jesus? Because we already know that it's Judah that comes through, and Judah's in the line, not Joseph. It has nothing to do with Joseph, so what does it really matter? But the truth is the line would not have survived without Joseph, because they would have all starved to death. If it wasn't for Joseph and his leadership, many would have died. And this was not just a small famine, this was a completely regional famine, even down in Canaan where his family was. They didn't have any food. This wasn't a small famine. This wasn't they just went to the fridge and couldn't find anything that they didn't like, or mom hadn't been to the store yet this week. This was everywhere in the entire known world was struggling to find food, and they were all on the brink of starvation. So the line from Abraham to Jesus is in serious jeopardy. All of Abraham's grandsons were in dire need of food, even Judah. Genesis 42, 1 through 3 says this: When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you keep looking at each other?" He continued, "I have heard that there's grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so that we may live and not die." Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. As a father, I can understand what he's saying here. He's like, "Why are y'all still here? There's food over there. We're hungry. Go get the food. What are y'all doing?" So he sends 10 of his sons down to Egypt. He sends 10 of his sons down there, 10 of his 12. Obviously, he doesn't send Joseph because he believes that Joseph is dead. He thinks he's dead, so he doesn't send him, obviously. And he also keeps Benjamin back because Benjamin was the second son of his favorite wife, the love of his life, Rachel. She died in childbirth, giving birth to Benjamin. So Jacob's not letting the son out of his sight. And you can really see, what's going on in his head here. He's already lost his favorite son. He's already lost Joseph. Joseph's already dead. He was torn apart by animals. So he's going to keep this son, Benjamin, close to him. He's going to keep him close to him. He's not letting him go to Egypt. Little does he know that his son, Joseph, is waiting in Egypt, waiting for him. 7 years of plenty, and now they're in the famine. At least 20 years Jacob has believed that Joseph is dead. At least 20 years, and he is still not over it. He has still not forgotten Joseph. And we see that. And he still babies and protects Benjamin, the only one he's got left. So this caravan sets out, and the 10 brothers head on down to Egypt. And boy, oh boy, what they are about to find is the craziest thing ever. The last thing that they would ever expect. They come into Egypt, and they start asking around about where they can find food, where they can buy food, where they can buy some grain. And they are sent to Pharaoh's number 2, a man by the name of Zaphenath-Paneah. Okay, that's what Joseph's name was changed to. They come into the presence of this man, this leader with great power, and this leader with great authority. And what's the first thing that they do? They fall down on their faces and they bow before him. They bow before him, they put their faces all the way to the ground, and immediately Joseph recognizes them and knows who they are. Page 34 in the story. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. But he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he asked. "From the land of Canaan." They replied, "To buy food." Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Imagine the feeling that Joseph had in the pit of his stomach when he sees 10 of his 11 brothers coming in here. He's like, "Yeah, what's up?" He's ready to go. Think about this. Put yourself in his shoes for a minute. They sold him into slavery. He's probably hating them. He's probably has this crazy mix of anger and spite and vengeance, but also at the same time love and longing and missing them. Somehow he recovered quickly enough to make the decision not to reveal himself as their brother. And this is the start of a long story, a weird interaction between Joseph and his brother. Joseph doesn't just tell them right off the bat who he is. He kind of messes with them. He tests them. He accuses them of being spies. He says, "Look, you guys aren't coming here to get some grain. You're not coming here to buy food. You're coming in here to see how naked the land is. You're coming to see how bad off Egypt is." So he takes them and he throws them all in prison.
Oh my.
Now the Bible doesn't say this, but beyond a shadow of doubt, it was the same exact prison cell that he sat in all those years. If I was Joseph, I'd be like, "Look, y'all are going right where I was. Y'all are all in the same cell. It's little. I know I was in there." And he sent them in the same one. That may not be true, but it's got to be. So he takes his brothers and he throws them in prison. 3 days later, he pulls them back out. 3 days later, he pulls them back out and he says, "Look, I'm going to let you all go on one condition. On one condition, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to keep one of your brothers here, but you're going to go back home and you're going to bring me the youngest brother, and you're going to bring him to me so I can meet him." So he keeps Simeon, throws him in jail, and sends the rest on the way. So the 9 brothers return to their father Jacob. They return with grain. They have plenty of food now. Their money's been returned to them. So they get back and they tell Jacob everything that happened. And Jacob is like, "Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I am not letting Benjamin go. He is not going on my side." So now he's basically saying, "Look, I've already lost Joseph. Joseph's already dead. He's been dead 20 years, and now Simeon's dead too. You say he's off in prison, but he's dead to me because I'm not letting Benjamin go. I'm not letting Benjamin go." They open up all their sacks. They find all this money. So now they know if they get back, they're going to be accused of stealing the grain. So then Jacob doubles down. He's like, "Absolutely not. You're definitely not going." Well, a little bit of time passes, and apparently all the grain that they got from Egypt ran out, and now everybody's hungry again. Everybody's hungry, and it says even that their children were starving. So Judah comes and he convinces Jacob that they have to go and they have to take Benjamin. So Jacob finally begrudgingly lets all the brothers go back to Egypt. They make the journey again, and upon arrival, Joseph sees his brother Benjamin, his full brother Benjamin is with him, and he sends them to his personal house and tells them to make a huge meal for them to share together. They share lunch and they have a good time. In this lunch, everyone is given a portion except for Benjamin. He is giving a five-fold portion. A five-fold portion. So then Joseph tells them to go on. He tells the steward to fill their sacks with as much food as they can carry, to put all their money back in and send them on the way, except for one thing. He said, take my cup that I use, and put it in the youngest brother's bag. So they send it in there, send them on their way. In the morning, the brothers are sent off. They get ahead, and Joseph sends his guard out to them. And they go out, they search all their packs, and they find Joseph's cup and Benjamin's stuff. And this is the part of the story that we need to understand, because this is where it all comes together. All of Joseph's little plan comes together here. Because what the brothers do next is the most important thing. How they react to Benjamin stealing this cup is important. Because Joseph knows firsthand what would have happened 20 years ago if this exact situation and this exact scenario would have happened. They would have said, well, he stole the cup. You take him, we're going back home. You can have him. We don't want him anymore. We don't care. Kill him. Let us go home. So he sets up this huge, elaborate test for his brothers that took months and maybe even years to set up, just so he could see what his brothers would do. As soon as the guard catches Benjamin and they accuse him of stealing, Joseph can see the heart of the brothers has changed. All of them tear their robes off in a sign of mourning and distress at the trouble that their brother is in. And then they get back to Joseph and they fall down on their face. They fall down in front of him and beg for the life of their brother. They beg and beg to take his place. Take his place so Benjamin can return to his father. Joseph can't handle it anymore. He sees the change in his brother. He sees the love that his brothers have for Benjamin. They see the love that they have and the admiration that they have for their father. They even seem remorseful about what they've done with their brother that is no more. And he can't handle it anymore. He tells all the Egyptians to leave, and he's in the room with just him and his brother, and he reveals his identity to his brothers. Page 39. Joseph said this to his brother, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer because they were terrified in his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one that you sold into Egypt. So he chops this down to his brother. He's like, I am the one that you sold. That was me. And look at me now. Imagine the roller coaster they were on at the moment. Put yourself in their shoes real quick. They've been dealing with this Egyptian official who has been treating them awfully. He's thrown them in prison. He's kept one of the brothers. He sent them off, bring them back. He's doing all this crazy stuff with them. And then all of a sudden he says, I'm your brother. I'm your Joseph. Hey, remember that guy you sold into slavery? Yeah, that's me. He's Joseph, that snot-nosed, dreaming, run-and-tell dad, punk of a little brother that they sold. Yet Joseph is no longer angry. He's no longer resentful. He's no longer vengeful. He's forgiven them, and he is dying to embrace them. He grabs a hold of Benjamin, his full brother, and he falls down and he weeps with him and embraces him. It's a beautiful picture of forgiveness and redemption and family. Joseph isn't done, though. He tells his brothers, he said, look, you all go back, get my father, and bring him here. God tells Jacob that it's okay to go down to Egypt, that while they're there, he will make them into a great nation. And when it's time for them to come out, he will let them come out. He will bring them out of Egypt. So Jacob goes down to Egypt. And there's a heartbreakingly beautiful reunion between Joseph and Jacob from Genesis 46. Joseph had all of his chariots made ready and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel. And as soon as Joseph appeared before him, he threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time. And Israel said to Joseph, now I am ready to die because I have seen for myself that you are still alive. How great is that sentence? He's like, my life, everything is good now. I can die and die happy because I know that you are alive and well. It's a reunion of a father and son, of a father who thought his son had been dead for 20 plus years, a son that hadn't seen his father in those 20 years and probably thought that his dad had died of old age, yet here they are reuniting and embracing and weeping together. A beautiful picture of love and relief. Jacob and the family come and they move to Egypt and they settle in Goshen. Joseph makes sure that they're taken care of and that they're allowed for their animals to graze through the fields and the herds. And the people of Israel prosper. And the people of Egypt prospered as well. Egypt is really a huge winner in this story. All of the grain that they stored and saved, they sold for money. And when people were out of money, they sold for land. So that the government in Egypt had pretty much all of the land around them as their own property. This sets up Egypt as a superpower that has never been throughout all of civilization at this time. Egypt during this time in history would rival the greatest civilizations throughout all of history. And the nation that God promised to Abraham is right in the middle of it. The people of Israel grow and grow, and towards the end of Jacob's life, he blesses his sons. Judah, the fourth-born son, was blessed to be the rightful heir and will take over after Jacob. It was the fourth-born Judah, not the first-born Reuben that it should have been, not Simeon and Levi, the second or third-born, but the fourth-born. The reason is because Reuben had sinned against his father, and Simeon and Levi had murdered a whole family in a village of Shechem after their sister Diana was taken advantage of in Genesis 34. So it's Judah that becomes the heir. It's Judah that is the one that is blessed. And he's now the father of a great nation. And our story today ends in the coolest way. It ends the coolest way possible. After Jacob dies, all of his brothers start getting worried. Start getting worried that now that the father's gone, that Joseph is finally going to take his revenge on his brothers. They're finally going to get back at him for everything they did. And this is what he said. Genesis 50, 18 through 21. His brothers came to him and threw themselves down before him. They said, "We are your slaves." But Joseph said to him, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended to do it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. How great is that response that Joseph has given to his brothers? They think that Joseph is still mad and still angry, and he's just been biding his time until Jacob was gone to get in there and exact his revenge. They meant to do him harm. They meant to do him evil. They meant to do what was awful for him, but God meant it for good, to save many lives. That is such a great attitude and outlook for the work of the kingdom of God that Joseph had. After this crazy roller coaster life that he had, that he can look back and say that is simply amazing. But what he says is 100% correct. God was in control. God was in control of it all. The fact that Joseph was sold into slavery did not catch God off guard. The fact that he was bought by Potiphar and rose in the ranks there and became head over his household was not a surprise to God. The fact that he was thrown in prison and then was promoted there and then was promoted to the second in command, the deputy Pharaoh, was not a surprise to God. God knew it all and he orchestrated it all. God was putting him in the exact place that he needed to be so that he would grow and be what he needed to be when he needed him to be it. So when Joseph became deputy Pharaoh, he was there to save the lives of so many people, including the people that would build the nation where Jesus would come out of. God was in control the entire time. God has been in control since creation, since the foundation of the world. God is in control right now, and God will forever be in control. You see, we don't serve a God that just set it all up and then kick back in a Barca lounger, pop some popcorn, and turn on the earth show. That's not how God works. He's constantly working through his people and in his people so that his will be done and his plans will be done for his goodness and his glory. Look what Hebrews 4 says. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give account. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith that we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who is tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. You see, God is sovereign. God is all-powerful, and God is in control. And most importantly, above it all, God loves us. So God worked this great and awesome plan through Joseph to save the line that would eventually lead to Jesus. And he did all of this and orchestrated it so perfectly so that the Messiah could come. Before his death, when Jacob was blessing his sons and he gave the blessing, he said this to Judah in Genesis 49. He said, Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness, who dares rouse him? The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he whom it belongs to will come. In the obedience of the nations shall be his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in wine, and the robes in the blood of grapes. You see, this passage all the way back in Genesis 49 is talking specifically about Jesus. The scepter did not leave the line of Judah. The nations are still obedient to Judah's line, because in Judah's line there was a man whose garments and robes were washed in the blood. A man who shed his blood for the forgiveness of all mankind. Because Jesus went to the cross to spill his blood so all humanity could be forgiven and redeemed back to God. Also, you could come to God and live. All because of God's sovereign plan and the willingness of Joseph, the line of Jesus was kept saved. All because of God's love, his burning desire to be with us. So Jesus came as a sacrifice. That is the most amazing thing you'll ever know. That's why we worship. It's why we praise. It's why we study the Bible. Because God is sovereign and he loves us with everything. So we're going to end with a song of worship. If you have a need, make sure you let us know. If you've never met Jesus, this is a great time to do that. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for everything that you have given to us. But God, we're so thankful for Jesus. And then even though we can open up the Old Testament, open up the very, very first book of the Bible, that the events happened 2,000 years before Jesus was even born, that we can look and see Jesus. To know that through the line of Judah, there would be a line coming out. So that Jesus could come and lay his life down. So that we could be redeemed. So that we could be forgiven. We love you. And we thank you. And we are yours. And it's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.